They were already laughing when I stepped back into the room, champagne flutes in hand, elbows brushing against velvet blazers, polished nails tapping on screens mid-toast. My name wasn't on the plaque, but I had paid for every inch of the brushed brass that bore hers. Elena stood center stage, radiant in cream, bathed in applause and LED light. Her friends flanked her like a gallery, sharp suits, perfect teeth, whispers half hidden behind crystal. I'd just come back from the restroom, or maybe I just needed a moment to breathe. Either way, when I returned to our table, I caught the tail end of a joke, something about practice marriages and leveling up. More laughter. The woman across from me, Lena's college friend, now her PR manager, winked at me and raised her glass. To Elena, she declared, standing, from test husband to top attorney. The whole table joined in, glasses clinking like tiny cymbals. I stood motionless, my hand resting on the back of a chair no one had saved for me. Then Elena turned, casual as if we were swapping menus, and handed me a thick manila envelope across the linen. Thought we'd launch with something symbolic, she said, her smile so polished it almost reflected the chandelier above us. Our first case. I stared at the envelope for a beat too long, then sat. Slid my thumb under the flap. Page after page of legalese, meticulously structured and pre-signed. No warning, no fight, just procedure, the paperwork of dismissal, her signature already looped in black ink on the last page. A sticky note in the corner read, "We can talk Monday. Just wanted it off my chest." I signed, "If you're still listening and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe." Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. I didn't look up when I handed it back. I just stood, folded the flap, and walked through the noise, past the coat check, down the steps of the venue she insisted on, some boutique hotel in Tribeca with gold railings and overpriced sparkling water. I kept the pen. Outside, the cold hit like clarity. I hadn't brought a coat, I didn't need one. I walked 3 blocks before I let myself breathe. At 9:12 p.m., as her inner circle toasted on, I stepped into an elevator across town, quiet, private. A lawyer I trusted was already waiting. No words. Just a nod. By 10:06, I'd signed a single page of my own, a transfer order. 19.8 million moved into a Cayman structure we'd never discussed. The account had been opened 9 months ago, seeded from an asset sale she'd called low stakes. At 10:49, my phone buzzed, a screenshot from a friend who stayed at the party. Her text to someone named Mark. He signed, "I'm finally clear." At 11:32, another notification, a LinkedIn update, Elena Torres, founder and managing partner, Torres Westlaw. At 11:47, I turned my phone to silent. At 1:13 a.m., the missed call started. 1, then 4, then 12, then 46. I didn't pick up. Not when our son called, not when my sister called, not when her assistant of all people texted, "Are you okay? Elena's looking for you." By 4:02 a.m., the count had passed 450. My screen lit up like a slot machine. I watched it flash once more in the dark, then turned it face down on the table. She thought the envelope was an ending, but all she handed me that night was permission. It started with small absences, a Thursday work trip that bled into Sunday, a new phone passcode after 8 years of open screens. The way she laughed, too loud, too polished, when certain names came up in conversation. Mark, mostly. "Her branding guy," she'd say, then quickly pivot. I didn't argue. I just memorized the pattern. She thought I was checked out, emotionally lazy, maybe even grateful to be left alone. But the truth was colder. I'd started withdrawing long before she handed me those papers. I didn't raise my voice. I adjusted my posture, listened less, logged more. I kept a ledger, not of finances, but of behaviors. I noted every meeting that ran too long, every lost call, every glass of wine too many at a firm gala, and how she always kept her phone screen tilted away when the screen lit up. One morning, she left for a client retreat and didn't kiss me goodbye. That's when I called our broker. The secondary house in Tahoe went first, quietly listed, discreetly sold. She never asked about it, not once. Then I shifted the revenue from my last 3 consulting contracts into a separate trust. The name on the entity wasn't mine, not on the surface. Elena was too busy rebranding to notice. Her independence arc was exhausting. New colors, new site, new bio that subtly erased any mention of me. I wasn't bitter. I just took note and began to erase her in kind from the parts of my life she hadn't yet claimed. 2 trademarks, both related to a process I developed before we married, were filed under a shell corporation in Delaware. I listed myself as technical advisor only. The address, a co-working space in Austin. She never asked where I flew on that quiet weekend. Around that time, I stopped reminding her to call her mother, stopped checking in on her stress levels, stopped playing the role of the steady, dependable man she could strategically discard later. Instead, I studied prenups, trust law, the timelines of marital asset division when intent could be documented. I moved slowly, but with precision. I rewrote my will. I appointed a trustee, someone who knew me long before Elena ever walked into my life. I made a list of non-negotiables and began drafting letters I hoped I'd never need to send. When she started talking in abstractions, my firm, my legacy, my story, I said nothing, just nodded, watched, and stored the phrasing like ammunition. Because once a person starts narrating their own myth, you know the script is more important to them than the people in it. She mistook my silence for softness. She mistook my withdrawal for weakness. But she never noticed the pen I stopped carrying, the ring I stopped wearing, the way I began using noise-canceling earbuds at night, not for music, but for peace. When I made the last asset shift, our joint brokerage into a staggered trust with mirrored clauses, she was out of town, celebrating a friend's birthday in Miami, a friend whose name she'd never once mentioned before. I had dinner alone that night, filet, bourbon, and a copy of our original prenup, annotated in red. My lawyer had added a post-it that read, "Most forget Clause 12B. You didn't." I smiled. She was already planning her exit, but so was I. Only difference was, mine didn't need a press release. There were hints. A certain smirk she wore after phone calls she claimed were logistics. The way she always corrected people, "It's Elena Torres, not Mrs.," with a rehearsed ease that tasted like pre-release branding. But I let it slide. Not because I didn't see it, but because seeing it wasn't the point. Timing was. Her inner circle had shifted long before the launch party. The friends she now kept weren't the ones who knew us when we were building our first apartment out of mismatched IKEA and hand-me-down furniture. These were newer, sharper, people who spoke in curated hashtags and ROI, people who smiled with teeth but never with warmth. And then there was him, Derek, the marketing advisor officially, her go-to for visuals. He was at every dinner suddenly, offering insight no one had requested, too confident, too casual. Elena laughed differently around him, shorter, higher, a kind of laugh I remembered from when she first met me. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Then one morning, I saw a message flash on her iPad as she left for yoga. If he hasn't figured it out by now, maybe he deserves the surprise. It wasn't signed. But I didn't need a name. I scrolled through the call logs. 3 to Derek the previous night, 1 just before midnight. The timestamp lined up with when I had texted her, "Got home safe, you?" She never replied. From there, her narrative accelerated. She started speaking about the firm as her liberation story. "I just need to stand on my own," she said over brunch, the kind she insisted we schedule like meetings. "You get that, right? You've always been stable. I've always needed to push." It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so deliberate. At a brunch 2 weeks before the launch, I overheard one of her friends murmur, "She's finally cutting dead weight. Honestly, she's been carrying him for years." They didn't know I was behind them. They didn't know I'd already signed the papers that quietly shifted our joint real estate portfolio into a single-owner trust, mine. At 8:47 p.m. the night of her firm's opening, after the toast and the envelope and the laughter, she sent him a message, the kind of thing people write when they think no one's watching. He signed, "I'm finally clear." At 8:48 p.m., I was in a black car, silent as it crossed Delancey. At 9:06, I was logged into my secure account. By 9:15, I had authorized the transfer. $19.8 million moved into a Cayman structure filtered through 2 tiers of business entities. the exact amount I'd projected she'd try to angle toward in a future asset negotiation. I closed the laptop softly. Let her have her moment. Let her think the contract ended something. Because what she didn't see, what her entire curated circle failed to understand, is that I wasn't the test subject. I was the grant writer, the patron, the walking ledger she built her rebellion on, and I had just audited the whole experiment. My phone rang at 7:32 a.m. sharp. I was already dressed, standing in front of the mirror, fastening the last button on a charcoal shirt she never liked. Too stiff, she once said. I liked it just fine today. Elena's name lit up the screen. I answered without a word. She didn't say good morning. Just, hey, I forgot to ask. You'll transfer the condo title, right? The Manhattan one. I slipped on my watch. It's already gone. Pause. What do you mean, gone? Sold. Months ago. Another pause. Slightly longer. I could hear the background shift. Drawer open, keys maybe, a door clicking shut. But you can't, that was under both our names. No, and I said, reaching for my passport. It was under the marital trust, which I dissolved quietly. Elijah, this isn't funny. I'm heading to the airport, tax counsel in Zurich. Have your lawyer send the formal request. I ended the call before she could find the next word. By 7:38, she was at the front of the building, Midtown, doorman lobby, keycard access, the one she used to enter freely, loudly, whenever she needed to remind herself of the assets she assumed were hers. This time, the doorman didn't buzz her in. I'd updated the list 2 weeks prior, removed her name, revoked her access code. No drama, just a form, signature, date, ID, building protocol. She pressed the intercom. Nothing. She waved at the concierge. He looked down, then tapped a note on the screen. No clearance. She called again. I was already in the car, already watching the city blur past tinted glass. The driver asked if I preferred silence. I nodded. She texted, "You didn't have to embarrass me. We could have handled this maturely." I didn't reply. She followed it with another, "This isn't how professionals act." The irony didn't even sting. At 8:04, she called my office line. My assistant, who's been with me 10 years and knows the sound of a brewing storm, answered with perfect calm. "He's unavailable this morning. Would you like to leave a message?" Click. I imagined her pacing now. Not in heels. She never wore them when she wasn't performing. Just socks, phone in hand, pacing some high-rise hallway with nothing but her own echo and the low buzz of a door that would not open. She thought that envelope was her power play, that it was clean, legally binding, bold, but a signature is only power if the person signing it doesn't know the rules of the game. And I knew every rule, every clause, every dollar marked for clean separation. I had crafted my exit in silence while she rehearsed her grand debut, let her stand outside the condo she thought she'd own, let her call every contact she stacked in her phone like business cards, let her feel that first crack, because the smile she wore last night, gleaming, triumphant, rehearsed, was already gone by sunrise, and all that remained was a woman with a plan she didn't fully understand, watching the door to her future stay shut. The panic didn't start with the condo. That was just a hairline fracture. The break came 12 hours later in a quiet conference room 2 floors above her firm's newly polished glass door. Her assistant had laid out a catering invoice, a flower vendor follow-up, and 2 marketing retainers that needed authorization. All standard, all routine. Elena opened the app on her phone. Face ID, tap, load, then access denied. She blinked, tried again. Session expired. Please contact account administrator. She assumed it was a glitch, a signal drop. She switched to Wi-Fi, closed the app, reopened it. Same screen. She set the phone down, exhaled through her nose, picked up her firm's card, backed by our joint line for transitional liquidity, as her advisor had once phrased it. She tried it on the payment terminal, declined. Her face flushed before the assistant could even ask if something was wrong. She stepped into her private office and called the bank. Not the main line. She had the direct number to her personal manager. Perks of proximity, of assuming the spotlight. "Hi, yes, this is Elena Torres. I'm getting a block on both my business and personal accounts. I need you to lift whatever hold was..." Pause. Her expression froze. She stared out the window without seeing the street below. So that can't be right. Who issued the instructions? Her hand gripped the phone tighter. No, he doesn't have, that's not. She stopped talking, listened, then quietly ended the call. At 12:47 p.m., my phone lit up with her name. I let it ring twice, then once more. Then her message came through, short, frantic, typed too fast to fix autocorrect. What are you doing to my accounts? I waited. I was in a meeting technically, but the message wasn't surprising. It had just arrived sooner than I expected. At 12:52, I replied, following your lead, welcome to your first case. I watched the 3 dots appear, then disappear, then nothing. Elena had made a career of control, of knowing the law better, faster, sharper than her opponent. She thought the filing was the game, the performance was the win. But precedent isn't drama, it's preparation. 3 weeks before her launch, I'd filed an updated amendment to the joint liquidity clause. My lawyer, older, quiet, surgical, had included language that allowed for suspension of all shared lines pending final valuation of contribution sources. I'd signed, notarized, delivered through channels she rarely checked anymore. The bank complied. There was nothing dramatic about it, just numbers, protocol, sequence. She had always assumed her bar card made her untouchable, that intelligence outranked awareness. But law, like leverage, doesn't favor noise. It favors the one who read further, understood faster, moved earlier, and now the same firm that toasted her rise couldn't process payroll without my quiet approval. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was the attorney, but I was the one holding precedent. The first few comments were everything she'd hoped for. Congratulations, Elena. Such an inspiration. Finally, a firm with vision. The launch photos, Elena in white, arms crossed in front of her new office signage, went live on LinkedIn 2 days after the party. She had curated every frame, the lighting, the text overlay, even the quote she insisted made her sound disruptive but grounded. But then came the shift, subtle at first. A former law school classmate commented, "Big moves, hope the funding source was as ethical as the branding." Someone else, "Congrats. Would love to hear more about your case management style." Elena dismissed them. Trolls, jealous ex-colleagues, people with too much time, until the screenshots surfaced. They weren't crude or scandalous, not directly, just undermining, quietly vicious. One showed her texting Derek, "The donors don't care what we say as long as we sound passionate and show up in heels." Another showed a reply from him, "He doesn't suspect a thing? Damn." A third, a photo from her gala taken from the side. She was smiling too close to him. The photo was cropped tightly, but not enough. Anyone who'd seen her partner bio could recognize the figure beside her wasn't me. The screenshots had been posted to a legal community forum, one I'd introduced her to years ago. It was where firm founders swapped tips, praised each other's deals, and, apparently, shared rumors. One of the accounts that reposted them, a former client, mine, originally. I'd referred her years back when she needed traction and hadn't yet built a name. She'd done good work for him, I'll admit. But reputations aren't cement. They're glass. Elena called him directly. "Mark, this is a violation. That content's defamatory, and frankly, I'm disappointed. I helped you with that entire acquisition." He interrupted. "I didn't post anything. I reshared what was already circulating. Public platform, Elena. You need to take it down. It's harming my firm's image." There was a pause. Then he said flatly, "We've decided to end all affiliation. Please remove our logo from your site." She stared at the screen. The LinkedIn profile she'd spent weeks crafting now had over 30,000 views, not all of them celebratory. Comments were now turning sharp. Interesting that a firm about integrity is wrapped up in so many rumors. Is it true your seed funding came from marital assets? Transparency is everything, right? She called Derek. He didn't pick up. She texted, no reply. A few hours later, his wife posted a vague quote on her own page. Some people confuse ambition with betrayal. Watch them lose both. That post had over 200 likes by nightfall. Elena tried to control the fallout. She posted a statement about the challenges of being a public-facing female entrepreneur. She removed a few of the photos, hid the tagged ones. changed privacy settings, but the web doesn't forget. Screenshots don't dissolve, and every time she tried to explain, someone reposted the jokes, the texts, the cropped photo. What she'd built as her grand entrance had become a hall of mirrors. Every angle showed something she hadn't intended. She had always believed she could manage image. That narrative was a tool she owned, but perception doesn't take orders. And credibility, once cracked, doesn't glue back clean. She was mid-call with a branding consultant when the knock came. 3 taps. Firm, professional. Her assistant opened the door just as Elena raised a finger for silence. Annoyed, a man in a gray courier jacket stepped inside, checked a clipboard, and handed her a manila envelope, neatly labeled, legal weight, no emotion. "Elena Torres?" he asked. "Yes, I'm on a signature required." She signed, automatically, didn't even glance at the return address. The courier left as quickly as he arrived. She stared at the envelope like it was nothing more than vendor paperwork. But when she peeled back the flap, something changed in her shoulders. I know her well enough to imagine the freeze. Half awareness, half denial. Inside, 3 things. First, a set of asset protection documents, stamped, registered, prepared by a firm she had once interviewed at and turned down for being too dry. Second, a forensic report, cleanly structured line by line, detailing the exact dollar amount and timeline of every marital asset directly or indirectly used to launch her firm. Everything, the consulting revenue I'd allocated to our joint fund, the silent equity transfer she'd signed off on without reading, the tax deferments she'd nodded through during last year's planning dinner. It even included timestamps from our shared family calendar where review docs, Elena firm, overlapped with transfers from our liquid reserve. The third item was a copy of our prenup. Page 7 was dog-eared. Clause 12 was highlighted in red. Business ventures launched, developed, or otherwise sustained using funds sourced from marital assets shall be considered joint property, with proportional claim rights as defined by contribution percentage. Next to it, a number, 82%. She read it twice. Below that, a signature block, and 1 line typed in small, quiet font. Acknowledgement of claim receipt required within 72 hours. She didn't move for a while. Her assistant later told someone that Elena just sat there, the envelope open in front of her, eyes fixed but not reading anymore. The consultant was still on the line, confused. She hung up without a word. She thought she'd launched her firm with vision, with grit, with independence. That was the word she loved. She wore it like armor, posted it on captions, engraved it on mugs. But independence financed by deception isn't independence at all. What she'd really done was build a boutique law firm on a foundation she didn't own, a balance sheet she never audited. She was the face. But the funding, the timing, the scaffolding, me. And now she was being served not just with documents, but with memory, with numbers that didn't lie, with Clause 12, the one she skimmed when we first signed, too focused on her career to worry about the fine print. And the countdown had already started. I was on the terrace, drink in hand, the city folding quietly into dusk. The club wasn't flashy, leather chairs, aged wood, old money, but it was mine. One of the few places she never liked. Too still, she used to say. Too male, too stiff. I liked it for all those reasons. She arrived fast, breathless, fury radiating before she even cleared the doorway. I knew the sound of her heels before I turned, sharp, intentional. For a woman who curated every moment, she hadn't planned this one. "You're trying to ruin me," she hissed, too loud for the room. A few heads turned. I didn't flinch, just set my glass down and stood, smoothing the front of my jacket with a quiet breath. "No," I said, "I'm simply exiting. Quietly." "You call this quiet?" Her voice cracked, not from volume, but from the corner she'd backed herself into. "You've poisoned everything. My firm, my name. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've claimed what's mine," I said. "You just didn't think I would." She moved closer, too close. Her finger came up like she might jab it into my chest. That's when security stepped in, discreet but firm, 1 man on either side of her, hands hovering just near enough to remind her this wasn't her venue and this wasn't her stage. "Elena, please lower your voice," one said. You have no idea who I am, she snapped at him, but she was wrong. They did. They knew me, and they knew her, not from who she was, but from what she'd become. Behind her, near the edge of the bar, two of her own colleagues from the firm were watching. I recognized them. Young, ambitious, quiet women who had once looked at Elena like a future version of themselves. Now they looked tired. One of them leaned in and whispered to the other, not realizing I could still hear. She should have known better than to provoke a contract guy. I didn't smile. Elena noticed them too. Her eyes darted, fast and sharp, and for a moment I saw it, the isolation. Not from me, but from her own image. The version she had carefully projected, unshakable, brilliant, composed, was crumbling right there on the polished tile. "You're doing this to humiliate me," she said, quieter now, but still shaking. "You want to watch me fall." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a brief second, I saw the woman I married. Not the one who handed me divorce papers with a smirk, not the one who texted her affair partner to celebrate her freedom, but the version from before when we still built things together. "No," I said. "If I wanted to humiliate you, I would have spoken. I haven't." And then I stepped past her. No exit line, no theatrics, just the soft click of my shoes as I walked back inside. Behind me, she stood frozen. The room didn't pause for her. Conversations resumed. Ice clinked in glasses. The world kept turning, and she stood alone. Her attorney's voice was too smooth. Practiced charm wrapped in civility. I knew the type. Polished, eager to get to resolution before reputations caught flame. "She'd like to settle amicably," he began. "A 50-50 split. Mutual silence on all fronts. No public statements, no media traction, no extended discovery." He paused, waiting for my response. I gave him none. So he added, gently, "You have a lot to gain by keeping this contained." I let the silence stretch long enough for him to feel it, then I clicked the file folder already queued on my screen. The email subject line was simple: proposed adjustments. Inside were 3 attachments. The first, a forensic equity breakdown, clear as water. It showed where her seed money had come from, where her firm's early vendors had been paid from a joint line she wasn't authorized to tap, and how the rent for her office space had been routed through a personal property deduction. Mine. The second, screenshots. Not of the affair texts. That drama bored me now. These were cleaner. A thread where she discussed moving donations from a client-sponsored gala into her operating budget, complete with a joke, "They think it's going to scholarships. Honestly, let them." The third file was the real hinge, a video recording, iPhone quality, her sitting on our couch a year prior, sipping wine, laughing as I read aloud a basic agreement. "This confirms that any legal practice you establish will not involve or rely on marital funds. All capital must be independently sourced and documented." On the video, she rolled her eyes and said, Yeah, I signed my life away." Then scribbled her name. She'd forgotten about it, but I hadn't. I sent the email at 10:06 a.m. By 10:44, her firm had removed Derek from their website. His LinkedIn changed by noon. Former partner, Torres de West. By 12:23, I got a text from Derek's wife. "I just wanted to say thank you. I don't need the details. Just know that someone choosing truth matters." At 1:10 p.m., Elena's lawyer called again. This time, his voice had lost the velvet. "She's reconsidering her position." I said nothing. At 1:14 p.m., her name flashed across my phone. The message was short, typed hard, no punctuation. "Fine, take it all." No space, no grace, just a white flag snapped in half. She'd spent 2 years painting herself into a future she didn't own. Every client pitch, every gala toast, every podcast interview about becoming self-made, all of it tethered to foundations she assumed I'd never question. But in the end, everything she tried to claim had become evidence. Every step forward she took was traced back to a signature, an account, a decision made when she still believed I'd never push back. Now, her firm was unstable. Her name was whispered with hesitation. Her lover was gone. His wife was weaponizing discovery. And Elena? She wasn't negotiating anymore. She was conceding. The sky in San Miguel has a way of staying quiet, even when the wind cuts sharp off the water. I'd been coming to this spot every morning for a week now, same stone bench facing the Atlantic, same black coffee, same silence. No lawyers, no asset maps, no headlines to manage. Just tide and time. That morning, the surf was low. Fishermen moved like slow shadows across the rocks. My phone buzzed once against the table, soft, almost embarrassed to interrupt. Elena. Subject line, no more angles. I didn't open it right away. I finished my coffee first, let the clouds move, let her wait. When I did tap it open, the body of the message was short. Not the usual legal cushioning or polished wordplay, just a few bare lines. I overplayed. I know that now. I let the story get ahead of me. Can we talk? She didn't say sorry. She didn't mention the gala or the envelope or Derek. Just, can we talk? It wasn't a question. It was a breadcrumb. One last attempt to call me back into her narrative, to turn the man she discarded into a co-writer of the aftermath. I read it twice, then hit reply. No greeting, no signature. Just 4 words. Case dismissed. Thread closed. Then I archived the email, not deleted, just out of reach, like her. I stood, walked down toward the beach, let the volcanic sand grind into the soles of my shoes. The ocean didn't care what deals we'd made or what contracts we'd weaponized. It pulled forward, pulled back, like always. She thought the quiet was the revenge, that my silence meant nothing was left. But silence is just space, a space I now own fully. No revenge, no press, no drama, just a man walking forward, unburdened, and a woman finally learning some doors never reopen.